Hi everyone, I am back with a solo episode and I'm answering the question that I think you guys have sent me the most messages about on social media, and that is, can you tell us more about the differences between consequences and punishments? So if you follow me on social media, and I'm pretty sure I've written about this on my Substack as well, but I'll often say that kids do need consequences, not punishments, and that those two things are not the same. So let's start there and let's unpack what I mean when I am saying a consequence versus a punishment. So for me, a consequence is usually something that is either a natural response to something that the child has done or a natural consequence to something that they have chosen to do. So, for example, if your child forgets their water bottle at home, they don't get to have their water bottle then when they're at school. That is a natural consequence of their inability to remember or whatever the case is, right? That's a really kind of simple example. Logical consequences are also another thing we want to think about, and those tend to be a little bit more orchestrated by parents. And we're going to think about what's appropriate in each moment in terms of what our child is doing and what we think we can do in response to that behavior. And I'll unpack this more with examples in a little bit, but I'm just giving you an overview. And for me, consequences should have a little bit of friction. They should feel a little bit hard. And so I know that feels like, oh, well, then it's a punishment. But the reason why I don't think it's a punishment is because what I think about when I say the word punishment, and again, this isn't what it means really in terms of like the psychological definition of it or how a psychologist would describe it, but I'm going to talk about punishment in the context of how I think most parents perceive it, which is that we would leverage fear to get our kid to do what we want them to do, or we would shame them, or they feel punitive in nature. So let me give a few examples of a punishment. So, let's say your child is starting to cry because they don't get to have ice cream before dinner. And we immediately grow frustrated at this because maybe this is like the fifth night in a row that they've acted this way when they've asked for something where they clearly know the answer is going to be no. So, a punishment for me in that instance would be, you know what? We don't want to hear you cry. Go in your room and you can cry by yourself because you're hurting our ears and you're annoying everybody when you cry like this. You're acting like a baby. So when we start to really kind of name call, when we start to make the child feel embarrassed, when we hope that we can shame the child into stopping, those are moments where to me it feels more like a punishment rather than what would the consequence in that instance be. So punishments to me are usually coming from a place where the parent, you the parent, are not regulated. You are reactive and you're usually just pulling at something. The other way this shows up a lot for me is a lot of parents that I start to work with, usually in one on one sessions, they'll usually hand out punishments, and it looks like an all or nothing response. So that means your child starts to cry again and you say, that's it, you don't get the iPad for the rest of the week. We just immediately go into removal, removing something, taking something away, but it's hasty and usually it's very disproportionate to like what the actual behavior was, right? We're kind of like it's a mismatch. We're kind of reactive and we're just pulling at anything to get them to stop. So for me, punishments are usually coming from a reactive place. Consequences are usually coming from a more thoughtful place where we've thought about what we're going to do when said behavior happens. So that for me is the primary difference. The reason why kids need consequences is because kids need boundaries. So a lot of times, like when I'm in a session with a family or even when I used to do group coaching, a lot of times the parent would say, okay, I set the boundary and then they got really upset. So can I just like, then do I put them in a timeout? Like we always want to know, like, what do we do when they get upset? And the truth is, that is the consequence, right? Like you set the boundary, you told them they couldn't have something. They feel really frustrated that they can't have that. They want that. Well, they can't have that. So what does that look like if we don't engage and keep fighting with them about it and just go like, I get it, but that's not happening. I know it's hard. And we're going to wait until you feel better or until you can calm yourself down before we do anything new. I think to me, that is the consequence. You set the boundary. You told them no, they're not getting what they want. Usually what ends up happening is through refusal and protest and crying and tantrums and arguing, whatever it is that your child does, 9 out of 10 times, then we escalate with them. We start to get upset too. We start to either yell, maybe we disagree with our partner because one is assuming the other one's being too soft and coddling, the other one's being too strict and harsh. And so now we have this like complete catastrophe on our hands where everybody's upset. And 9 out of 10 times when I've even asked families, like, when they took something away, like we can't even remember what happened or what set off all the dysregulation in the first place. So my feeling is like, keep your eye on the prize. If you're saying no to something, let that consequence play out. That is a consequence. They really want something. You're telling them they can't have it. Don't let their protest, their refusal, their anything change the outcome. Stay steady yourself, right? And you have to teach yourself how to dial down while they're dialing up. And this is hard. And this is why I work with families for 12 weeks at a time, because it just takes time. You have to really give yourself grace because it's not anything we're really used to doing when we see our kids struggling. So that is one of the things I want you to think about is like a lot of times the boundary is the consequence. We don't have to double down and keep giving them more consequences. We just have to let them experience the discomfort that arises when they don't get what they want, when the answer is no, when they can't have the toy, when they have to wait, when they have to, give something that they don't want to give over to somebody else, when there is denied access to the thing that they really want. So again, it's really about understanding that the boundary is the boundary. A lot of times as parents, we look for agreement, meaning like we set the boundary and we want them to be fine with the boundary. And when they're not fine with it, we want to punish that. And the truth is, like I used to tell my kids too when they were younger, you don't have to like my answer. That's okay. You still have to be respectful. You still can't scream at me. You still can't call me names. You still, all of that can't happen. Those are behaviors. Those are not emotions. Those are behaviors. But you don't have to love that I said no. You don't have to love that your dad just said no to something that you really want to do. But there are ways we can express that and we can handle that, right? So you could give your kids alternative scripts. Like I used to say to my kids, when you guys are feeling mad like this, you can say to me, I wish that wasn't your answer. I'm so upset that you said no. Like those are fair statements to make. That's fine. But I'm giving them an alternative to maybe throwing a toy, stomping their feet, slamming a door. Those are things that we don't want our kids to do. So with that, let's talk a little bit about, sorry, my nose is itchy if you're watching this on YouTube, but let's talk about consequences in the context of when we want to sort of build in a little bit of frustration. And that feels odd to say that because it's almost like we're contriving these hard moments. But I recently interviewed Dr. Will Dobud, author of Kids These Days, and we talked about this on that episode. It's about raising resilient kids. And one of the things we highlighted was the importance of creating safe struggles for kids. And as parents, that feels like the opposite of what we're supposed to do. We don't feel like we're supposed to let our kids struggle. That word doesn't even go with parenting in our minds, right? Struggle and parenting feels wrong, right? Those are not the two things we're aiming for. Like if someone says, hey, what kind of parent do you really want to be for your kids? You're rarely like, I'm going to be the kind that's going to make them struggle. Like that just doesn't go, right? It just doesn't even sit right. But the truth is there is a balance to how we're showing up. And if we can do it with love and provide opportunities where there is safe struggle, kids learn much faster. They grow more resilient. They actually become more grateful because now they understand what it's like to go through something hard and then they value the good moments. So how do we do that? How do we create safe struggles? So one of my favorite techniques is actually in Joe Newman's book, Raising Lions. And I teach families this when we work together, and I've talked about it on videos, but it's the idea of doing breaks. I used to call them resets before I ever met Joe, but it's basically the same thing. And the idea of a break is this. It's not the same as a timeout. What it is when your child engages in the behavior you don't want them to do. So let's say it's throwing a toy, okay? So let's say they throw a toy and now you're going to implement a break. And again, I'm going to give you a very sort of pared down version of this, but it's very different for every child, for the age and stage that they're in. But I'm going to give you a general way of looking at it so you can think about how it would apply in your home or with your child. So let's say your child throws a toy and now you've said to your child that, we can't throw our toys. And if we do, I'm going to just pick you up and we're going to stop playing. And we get to go back and play when you can stay calm for 1 full minute. And it doesn't matter how old your child is. If your child is 8 or 2, a break is a minute of remaining regulated. So in theory, a break could take 20 minutes. And for 19 minutes while they're crying and mad that you stopped them from playing, That's just part of that process. And we're giving them that space until they get to that 1 minute of calm. And the minute they calm down, you can either turn on a timer, you can indicate in some way that you're noting or you're documenting or timing how long it's taking them. And then once they get to that 1 minute mark, then you know that, great, let's go back and play. And the reason why breaks are really effective is this. Number one, it takes us a little bit out of the driver's seat. We're not talking. We're not overly explaining to them. We're not telling them over and over, once you stop crying and you stop and you listen and you're calm for a full minute, then you can go back and play, blah, blah, blah. Like, we're not doing any of that. We're not sort of managing it, if you will. I always tell families that I work with, when we start doing breaks, I always say do it on a weekend when you are not busy, when you don't have anything on your schedule, because it takes time. And once you implement breaks and you do them for a couple of days, some kids will learn it in like 2 or 3 tries. They are the best method to use. I'm telling you, I've done it with several kids myself. They calm down much faster. They're able to regulate faster. And the reason why it works is because we are creating some frustration. So back in the case of the kiddo who throws, we're removing the child from play immediately. So we're not giving a warning. We're not talking about like, hey, we talked to you already about throwing. You know you're not supposed to throw. Remember, gentle hands. Hands are for holding. Hands are for playing, not for throwing, right? I know all the things we say and they're all great, but for a child who is like, let's say, a little more strong-willed, or they're just trying to see where is the boundary, they're going to throw again because everything you just said didn't really matter. So we have to do something. And that's where it's really important that we respond faster. So if you're going to keep going back and giving them this really sort of detailed explanation around all the bad reasons of why we shouldn't throw, they're just going to keep ignoring you. You're going to grow more escalated, and by the 5th time, that's when we snap, that's when we yell, that's when we take all the toys away, that's when we usually reach for some kind of a punishment that doesn't make sense. So instead, if you just intervene faster, you don't get to that point, and your child doesn't keep going and going and going and learning that actually, when my parent says don't do that, I can do it 6 more times before their voice changes and they yell, and that's when I know they're going to actually do something. So we want to reteach that for our kids. We want to help them understand that in a different way. So they throw. You've already told them we can't throw. If we throw, we have to take a pause from playing until we're calm in our bodies for 1 full minute, giving our bodies that chance to reset. And then we go back and play. So like I said in the beginning, when you're first doing this will take a while. You're not going to have a child who's going to be like, oh, I love a break. Let's go take a break together. Like, I wish that would be so great, but that's not really the case. We're really infusing some frustration there because you want it to be a direct consequence to their actions, so that the next time they get ready to throw, there is this feeling of, ooh, I know what happens when I throw. They take me away from playing and I have to stop and I have to stay calm. And actually, I think I'd just rather not throw and keep playing. That's what you're essentially helping them develop. But it requires consistency, and it requires you to respond very consistently over multiple trials, meaning they're going to want to test this a few times to see, does this break thing really happen? So again, in a nutshell, that's what I would tell you is one of the best processes. And again, it works for all ages. It's really effective. I've seen it work really well for kids who are even limited in terms of their verbal skills, because it's an action-oriented process, right? So they throw, you remove them, you just say no throw, even if it's a younger child. They get mad, and you're just waiting, and you're waiting, and you're going to go, shh, soon as you can be quiet, we'll go back and play. And you're basically putting it on them to work on getting more regulated. And you're just calmly there with them. You're not escalating with them. You're not panicking, because that's part of the process. They're developing this skill. They're learning how to do this. So that for me is one of my favorites. Again, it's not an always. You don't have to do it all the time because there's a lot of different ways to look at consequences. But in large, like if you can teach your kids that you will do something when they do the thing you don't want them to do, they will start to change the way they respond, right? They will start to change and manage the impulse to maybe engage in a behavior that they shouldn't. So really the key in all of this is intervene faster with an action. Don't keep reminding, and start practicing what a break or a reset looks like. Also, the other question I get a lot is like, can they take their breaks alone? Do we stay with them? Does it have to be in the same spot? It doesn't have to be in the same spot. Stay with them if you can stay with them. Sometimes kids will regulate faster when the adult isn't there. I know there's like different opinions on this. Personally speaking, I don't think there's anything wrong with you leaving a child if you know they're going to regulate faster, as long as you are presenting it in a way where they're not being made to feel bad. So the example is like, let's say they're crying and you want to give them a break and you're upset that they're crying and you say something like, you know what? I don't want to hear you anymore. So get over there and go back in that corner. And if you're going to cry, cry, but nobody's listening. Like something like that, where it feels like you're too much right now and I can't be around you. That doesn't feel good to me. But if you knew your child self regulates faster if you're not there, and saying something like, you know what, I'm going to go step out and see and check on dinner, or I'm going to go and get at the laundry, or I'm going to go check on your brother, or I'll be back in 2 minutes. I've got to go use the potty, or something like that, where you're just getting yourself out of the environment. I think that's totally reasonable. And this way, we're not blaming the way they're acting and making it this whole thing. And we're just letting them regulate to a place where they can get there a little bit faster. It does not have to be in the same spot. You can stay with them. The whole idea is, can they get to that 1 minute of a regulated state on their own? The more you do this, the faster they go. So the first one might last 20 minutes. Maybe the first couple will last that long. And again, that's general. I've had some families go way over 20. I've had some families tell me it took 6 minutes. I've had some families report back like, oh my gosh, it took 3 minutes. So it's very different for every child. And there isn't a right or wrong either, by the way. You're just going to want to think about like, what do they do? And let's go from there. And then over time, you should start to see that decrease. And like, so even for me, I used to be able to say to kids, like, let's take a break. And once they got really in the hang of it and they knew, they'd get annoyed, right? They'd be like, oh, because remember, we want it to feel a little frustrating, right? We want it to be like, shoot, I shouldn't have done that. We want them to be thoughtful and reflect. But then they would do it and they would just sit for that full minute and then they would go back. And it was like they didn't need a break then for a really long time. So they're really effective. They're really great. Again, something that if you wanted to dive deeper in, certainly reach out to me or consider possibly doing coaching. But you can also learn a lot about it through Joe Newman's work if you get his book, Raising Lions. So let's jump into sort of ages and stages. So I'll kind of cover this briefly because again, this can be tough to know, but if you have a younger child, I'm going to say like 18 months to 3 years of age, I think redirecting is fair to do, meaning when your child's really dysregulated, if you're just like, recognize, name the emotion. I know it's hard when we have to come inside when you don't want to stop playing outside. I get that. Come on in, let's go build your favorite puzzle. That's a way of redirecting. Or let's go turn on the music. Or what if we look out the window and how many, leaves do you see on the ground if it's fall here right now? So I'm thinking of like what's outside my window. Or how many clouds do you see in the sky? Or let's look and see if it started to rain yet, or is it snowing? Those are good ways to redirect a child once you have had to set a boundary that they don't like and they're that age and now they're, let's say, coming in from outside or doing the thing that they don't want to do. So I do think redirecting is okay. Where I think you have to be careful with redirection is when we keep doing it when kids start to get older and we don't just let them experience the struggle and just experience the boundary and recover. That's where the break is really effective. And again, you can do breaks with younger kids. But when we're not, when we're always redirecting, we kind of take away that experience from the kids. And then it gets harder and harder for kids to manage frustration, to tolerate the discomfort that arises when we don't get the thing that we want or when things don't go our way. So the truth is, you actually want them to have those experiences. And the more that they can do that and the more regulated you stay through that, the better they do. So again, if you're implementing something like a break, the real benefit in that is like they're working towards something. They're working towards staying calm so that they can resume whatever activity it was that they were doing. So those are just some things to think about. I also think that sometimes I'll see parents of older kids try redirecting a lot. And the problem with that is, besides what I just mentioned, that you're taking away those moments of frustration, as kids get older, they get really swift to this. And there's almost like built in resentment, or maybe even that's not the right word exactly, but maybe they almost start to fight you on it, like, hey, why don't you do this instead? And why don't you? They can almost sense the panic in your voice. And so the minute they see that, it's almost like, ooh, I'm the one with the power right now. So then they just start doubling down. And then you start to get into like the ugly argument stage, I call it. And that's where they're like, no, I don't want anything. I don't want to do that. I don't want to eat anything good. I don't care what you're going to offer me right now. The answer is going to be no, because I'm the one in control. So again, redirection to me is a good thing for younger kids as they're learning, as these skills are emerging, as they're developing. But if we're talking about kids who are like 5, 6, 7 and older, Redirecting isn't always effective. In fact, a lot of times I think it does end up backfiring. So you want to think about, the takeaways I would say of this episode are this. Recognize when the boundary itself is the consequence and letting them work through that. Where and how could you implement breaks and have them work toward keeping themselves calm for 1 full minute? A really great phrase, I didn't talk about this, but I'll mention it right here, to think about is like, let's say your child's struggling and they want to go back to playing and now they need to do a break. You can say something like, do you want to go back and play with your blocks? And they're going to go, yeah. You're going to go, okay, great. Then just take your break for 1 full minute and you get to go back. The reason we want to say, do you want to fill in the blank is because that really promotes autonomy. If we say like something like this, if you want to play with your blocks, you need to take the break. We're the one in charge the whole time and we're giving the complete directive in that instance. So if we flip that and kind of show our kids where they have their own power, and that is in their ability to regulate, and that they get access to the thing they want once they can do the thing they need to do internally, it starts to give them a sense of autonomy. So that's why we want to phrase it that way. And again, when we're thinking about, sort of what to do and when to do, the most important thing to think about is really keeping yourself calm. So if you can reduce the number of repetitions, reminders, warnings, you are naturally going to be more steady and calm once you move into whatever that consequence needs to be. So if it's just setting a boundary, just set the boundary. If they're upset, let them be upset. They're working through it. As long as they see it does not change the outcome, and that happens consistently and predictably, they will stop becoming dysregulated every time. They really will. It holds no power for them. It loses all of its value. And then again, redirecting with younger kids is super appropriate. I think it can be really good for younger kids, but watch and see when it starts to become a slippery slope where you're always tempted to redirect them. We still want to balance that with moments of like, oh, I know this is going to be frustrating, but you got this. The more we can do that, the more we communicate to our kids a sense of trust, a sense of we believe you can do this. We believe you have what it takes to work through this, and we're right here and we're going to anchor for you right alongside you. So let me know if you guys have questions to this. If you guys want to learn more about it, you can go to theparentingreframe.com. I'll have links in the show notes if anybody wants to book a free discovery call just to see if coaching is the right option for you. But until next time, guys, thanks for being here.